Hello guys. So this is where we left off last time. We have clear everything. Ignore this for now. We're in tutorial 101, clear everything. So now what I'm going to teach you today is how to create an anonymous function. And how to make comments. So this is how you make comments. You put the percentage sign, and then anything you write that is going to show up in green is just going to be thought of as a comment. So like for example this. So an anonymous function is just it's a user-defined function that is made for relatively simple mathematical expressions. So let's just go through an example. It'll be a little easier to understand. For example, let's say I want to create a function or an equation that is a y equation dependent on x, which is going to be 3x plus 2, for example. So now we have 3x plus 2, and that's the equation that we want to create. So in order to create this relatively simple equation, we can create a function, and an anonymous function to be more precise. So the components of an anonymous function are very simple. So the first one is the name, in our case y. Then we have the equal sign. Then we have to define what variables does y depend on. In this case, y depends on x. So we're gonna say y depends on x, which is the add sign. Then you open parenthesis, you give it the variable that it depends on, and then you write the expression. For example, 3x plus 2. Where is my plus sign? Yeah. 2. So now as you can see, something's happening, and it's that it is highlighting my equal sign. And you're going to be like, well, why is this happening? So let's put a break on this right now, and let's go through this. So if we go back to our normal example, a equals 3, you see that when you write it on the script, it's going to highlight it. And it's going to highlight it because anything you write on a script without anything at the end, so just a equals 3, is going to be outputted to the command window. For example, if I run this right now, in order to run any of your scripts, you have to save them. So let's just save this as tutorial. So you can't have any spaces between your words. So now you see that when I run this, I created an a equals to 3. It's on my workspace, but it's also in my command window. Most of the times, I don't want absolutely everything that I write on my editor to also be in my command window, because then it just makes my command window cluttered. So then what you do in order to avoid things for outputting your command window is you put a semicolon. So now if I clear my command window, and then I run this again, you'll see that a as a variable is still being created and is given a value of 3. However, it doesn't show up on your command window. For something like a equals to 3, this is irrelevant. However, a lot of times in your codes, you create vectors that can have 100 of units. And you don't want 100 units like popping up in your command window. Like, that's just going to make it very slow. So I would recommend you always put a semicolon at the end of all of your expressions, unless you want it to show up in your command window. Okay, so that was just a little parenthesis. Now, as I told you the first tutorial, it is always good to start your code with clear all and CLC. This is just gonna clear your workspace and your command window, so every time you have a new code, you have a fresh everything. Now let's go back to talking about our anonymous functions. So now I have y equals add x, 3x plus 2, and now I put a semicolon, and it gets rid of that annoying highlighting. Now I can run this code right now, and you'll see that, clear. Sorry guys. Okay, let's do this again. Now you run it, and you see that you created a function. A function usually has this like cube inside this yellow kind of background. It's a function. So now what happens if you actually want to evaluate this function? So for example, if I want x equal to 2, we know that this would be equal to 3 times 2, which is 6, plus 2, which is 8. So we know that y of 2 is equal to 8, right? So now let's have Matlab do it. In order to have Matlab evaluate the function at a particular number, you say y of 2. And you can give it a number. For example, let's call it p. Or let's call it p. Now again, it gives me the highlight because it doesn't have a semicolon at the end. Now let's run it again. Now we see that p is equal to 8. That means that I created a new variable that is equal to my function y when evaluated at p. Does that make sense? So what Matlab is saying is creating another variable that is equal to this function when x is equal to 2. Very simple, right? So what happens if you want to know y at a lot of different points? So for example, if you don't want 2, if you want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So then what you can do is you can create a vector, let's call it v, and let's have v be 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's evaluate y at all those points so that we can call it double p, and then we can say y parenthesis little v. Now let's see what happens. Now let's run our code. And we see that pp becomes 5, 8, 11, 14. Now if we look at this, 5 is going to correspond to y equals 1. So 3 times 1 plus 2 equals 5. Now if we look at pp8, that is when v equals 2. So 2 times 3, 6, plus 2, 8, and then like that. So you don't have to evaluate each one individually. You don't have to go p y of 2, p y of 3, p y of 4. No. You create a vector, a raw vector, and then you evaluate y at that whole vector. So you just make your input variable a vector. I know this is a lot of information. Concisely, you will learn how to create anonymous functions by using the @ sign, and we also learned that the input for a function can be a scalar, for example 2 in the case of p, or it can be a vector in the case of pp, which is a vector called 1, 2, 3, 4, and what you get in response is another vector with all of the answers stored in it. I hope this is not too confusing. This is something that you're gonna need to use in your project in some way or another. So I hope you understood. Please feel free to email me if you have any questions. I'll see you